It's got a guide. You can read it there when it tells you what you can do. But a lot of the story of David, it's in the book of 1st and 2nd Samuel, starting with 1st Samuel 16 through the end of that, and then on through the 2nd Samuel to the end of it. And just so you know that it wasn't written by one single author necessarily. It is considered that Samuel wrote the first part, book 1, was all one single book at the beginning, and then there was prophet Nathan and the other gentleman's name, Gad. They took and put together the second part of it, and they broke it all out and made it 2 different books. So just so you have that background and that understanding of that. And you can see there in your page 2 also how we're kind of going to try and break this out. Page 3 has just, I thought it was a nice thing. It's a master timeline of David's life, so it goes through the years of some things that happened and how old he was and where to find that inside the scriptures. So if you really want to study ahead of time, you can look at these and you can say, okay, it looks like we're going to be in chapter 16 and 17, or you can just keep reading as much as you want and do whatever you want so that you have some understanding before you come. Some of it I know you're already going to know. And also then on the first part of the handout, it'll say week 1 or whatever, and right under that, it's got a name, and it will have the year that it happened and what David's age was, so that you can get an idea of that when we're talking about it. I guess that's it. Let's just dive right into it. So I can go really fast and you won't be able to keep up with me. So this whole story, it's going to start, it opens up where Saul is already king. And just a little background on that, Israel wanted a king because they wanted to be like all the other nations. Is that really the way it should be? Do we really want to be like the world? And God wasn't happy about it. Samuel took it personal that they rejected him, but God said, they haven't rejected you, they've rejected me. And so he went ahead, and they picked themselves a king, and it was Saul. And I think they looked at it just because he was very tall, said he was a head higher than most of them. But God warned them what would happen with the kings, that they would take over their lands and do all kinds of different things. You know, their freedom, they have freedom, but it wasn't really going to be quite freedom. We just heard that Sunday morning from Pastor Norm about Ahab and Jezebel. Terrible people, weren't they? Just terrible. And there was a lot of other kings like that. So I think they would have been better off. But this King David is very popular, and he is the strong point of the time of Israel. And God loved him, didn't he? And it was said he was a man after God's own heart. That's kind of neat. We should be that way too, shouldn't we? So right at the very beginning of Saul's reign, he disobeys God with Amalek. When they got the people of Amalek, and God told him, don't spare anything, but he did. He kept things and possessions and stuff like that. Anyway, he just was not really for the heart of God. And God had another plan. After a couple years, the kingdom was taken from him. He still reigned for 40 years. I think it was 40 years. But God was not pleased with him at all. So God had his plan, and it was in another person that would be anointed as king, which would be David, in the city of Bethlehem, which is about 6 miles south of Jerusalem. We'll look at that here in a minute on a map. In the hills of Judah. Let's bring that map up right now. Oh, well, she is so good. Look at that. I forgot my little pointer. So anyway, we're going to talk here a little bit about Ramah, which is where Samuel was. And then down in here is Bethlehem, way down here. So God tells him, go down to Bethlehem. There's someone down there that I want you to anoint and to be king. So he makes quite a travel down there. And in 1 Samuel 16:1, it's interesting because God didn't send him to Jerusalem, did he? He sent him, or in that area, but he sent him off down here to Bethlehem. And in that 1 Samuel 16:1, it says, and the Lord said unto Samuel, how long will you mourn for Saul? Samuel had something in his heart for Saul, but he just felt bad that it didn't work out with Saul. And God says, I have rejected him from the reigning over Israel. Fill thine horn with oil and go. I will send thee to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided me a king among his sons. Now, if you look at that, I mean, he already knew who he wanted, didn't he? He had it made up. He had already provided who it was going to be, and he didn't need anybody to give him any insight or any voting. There was no polls set up. God had it all set, didn't he? And so before Samuel even took a step, God had it all set and ready to go. And that's just how God is, isn't it? He knows what's best for us. He knows what to provide for us, what the best things are. Sometimes we think we need to win the lottery. But God knows that's not a good thing for us. Or other things. You just have to, we trust God, don't we? And we move and live in amongst that. Oh, we got a brother bringing me up he doesn't want me to blow your eyeballs out with what he said. So I have this. See? This is fun. You know I'm going to go crazy because last time I was all over and all my nieces and nephews made fun of me. So we went from Ramah down here to Bethlehem. Okay. I didn't hear that, but we're going to go on. 1 Samuel 16 and 4 through 5, it says, and Samuel did that which the Lord spoke, and he came to Bethlehem, and the elders of the town trembled at his coming and said, comest thou peaceably? Well, he's a prophet. He comes in, they're thinking, man, something serious is going on. Is there some kind of judgment that's going to take place? They're kind of scared. And he says, peaceably, I am come to sacrifice unto the Lord. Sanctify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice. And he sanctified Jesse, that's David's father, and his sons, and called them to the sacrifice. It really wasn't something that was to be real out in the open and spoken of yet, because Saul didn't really quite realize it was happening. So here Jesse brings in all of his sons, these 7 sons. He brings them in so that he can look at each one of them. Samuel can. And each one passes by. Each one has some impression. They might be tall, strong, military bearing. But God rejected every one of them. In Samuel 16, 6 and 7, it says, and it came to pass when they were come that he looked on Eliab. That's what Samuel did. And says, surely the Lord's anointed is before him. But the Lord said unto Samuel, look not on his countenance or on the height of his structure, because I have refused him. For the Lord seeth not as man seeth, for man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. We just don't know the heart of somebody. We really should be very careful about that when we make judgments or accusations about people. I understand that the way somebody might manifest themselves, things they may speak and say, that kind of shows what's in their heart. Didn't Jesus say what comes out of the mouth comes from the heart? So there are some things where you can discern, but sometimes, like in this case, they just were standing there. And in the Hebrew word for heart, it's lev, I think is how you pronounce it, L-E-V. And in that understanding, it encompasses the entire inner life, it says, is the meaning. Your mind, your will, your emotions, your character, your moral center. So God does not evaluate us the same way the world would evaluate. We have to remember that. Always keep that in your mind. Because God doesn't see There's no resume that can show God something differently, right? Whatever is, he knows already. There's no, you put on some major uniform and strut around. Doesn't mean anything to God either. And there's no height or any kind of strength that one person can have that could falsely represent him. God knows the very inside of your heart. When you're praying and you're talking to the Lord, you may as well just be honest with him. If there's things inside that you need corrected, just tell the Lord, I need your help with this. Or whatever, strengthen me here, there. He already knows. Now, I might be a little bit of a weird one, but I don't like to just speak certain things out loud and say things to others because I don't believe the devil can know what's actually in my heart or read my mind. I think that he learns from whatever you do and the things you say. So I'm just kind of that way. That's me. I don't like doing that. So in 1 Samuel 16:10 and 11, it says, again, Jesse made 7 of his sons to pass before him, and Samuel said unto Jesse, the Lord hath not chosen these. How must they have felt? Wow, none of us are good enough. And Samuel said unto Jesse, are here all of your children? And he said, there remains yet the youngest, and behold, he keeps the sheep. And Samuel said unto Jesse, send and fetch him, for we will not sit down till he comes. I think that may have told something to Samuel, that if there's only one more, this has got to probably be the one. And it's interesting to me that Jesse didn't even bring David to this gathering. Didn't even ask him to come. And it could be possible because usually in their culture, the oldest was the one who would get any kind of inheritance or any kind of blessing. It always came, and with David being so way down there, maybe he just didn't think it was actually going to be him. I'm going to throw this out there because in my studies, I don't know if anybody's ever watched the videos of the House of David. And in that, they portray that he was an illegitimate son, possibly. And but in the Bible, as I'm searching it, because I wanted to know myself, there's nothing in the Bible that even says what his mother's name was. There's nothing in the Bible that even says what any of Jesse's wives' names. And in that, I'm just cautioning you when you watch certain things to be careful because they embellish things just to make the ratings a little better. But it was like his mother was dead at the beginning when that started. But yet later, and you'll see it here in one of the coming up Bible studies, that David took his mother and father over to Moab and asked the king of Moab to watch them and keep them safe. While his mother couldn't have already been passed away and gone where we're at in the story right now, if later he's taking them over there. So I'm just giving you that little thought because I looked it up. There is some rabbis that they just came into it and decided they filled the gap with it. Even chose a name. It's kind of strange for that, but there's no really, not even historical documents to back it up. So anyway, David didn't show up. He was in the field, basically doing his job, watching the sheep, right? God's choice was really already faithful in doing the work that was in front of him. It wasn't like he was out networking with everybody or positioning himself to be ready. There was probably no thought in his mind that he was going to be king. It was obvious that Saul's son would be king. So David arrives from out of the field, and Scripture kind of gives us a little bit of what he looked like. It's about the only place I think that it does. And in 1 Samuel 16:12, it says, and he sent and brought him in. And it says he was a ruddy and withal of a beautiful countenance and goodly to look to. And the Lord said, arise, anoint him, for this is the one. was like immediate. God knew who he wanted. And when God knows what he wants, that's what he wants, because he knows what's best. In the next verse after that, it says, then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brethren, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. So Samuel rose up then, and he went back to Ramah. I guess that's all he needed to do. He accomplished what God wanted him to do, and I'm sure he was very pleased about that. So it's just interesting to me that these two things, they kind of simultaneously happen, where oil's poured all over David, anointing him, and the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him from that day forward. So this oil, you see it externally, something that we can visually see, and his brothers would have seen that. But the Spirit, it would have been something more internal and around about him, more invisible. And this is the difference, really, between Saul and David. Saul just had the office, but David will have the office, and he will have the Spirit of the Lord with him. Big difference. That's what God wanted. So I'm going to give you a little background of David's family. In 1 Samuel 17:12, it says, now David was the son of that Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse. That's his father's name. And he had 8 sons, and it talks about how Jesse was kind of considered an older man. And then in verse 14 in that same chapter, David was the youngest, and his 3 oldest, they followed Saul. They were in the military. They were involved in that. And it's interesting to point out that, and I know a lot of this is not brand new for some of you, but David being the 8th son, we know what number 8 means. What is that? A new beginning. So here he is, the 8th son, and boy, something new is about ready to begin, isn't it? Israel will be in their prime more than ever before. And they used to do a lot of different things. Circumcision was on the 8th day. Jesus resurrected 8 days later, right? And so David literally is going to be the beginning. So let's talk a little bit about also his shepherd years. Before he ever killed any giant or wrote any psalm, he spent a lot of years out there alone in the fields with sheep. Psalm 78, it gives us a little bit of something of God's commentary on that season. Now understand that this is not a psalm that David wrote. It was written by someone else. And it says 78, 70 through 72, he chose David, also his servant, and took him from the sheepfolds, from following the ewes great with young. He brought him to feed Jacob his people and Israel his inheritance. So he fed them according to the integrity of his heart and guided them by the skillfulness of his hands. Nice words, isn't it? And 2 qualities in there that God highlighted when he moved on that man to write that. The integrity of his heart. I know he falls a little bit later. Every one of his have fallen, right? Probably more than once. And he had skillfulness in his hands, a character, and he was very competent. His faith to me was crazy. You know what I mean? He had a lot of faith. We'll get to that in a little bit here too. But in the wilderness years that he was out there, they weren't wasted at all, were they? There was a lot of things that happened that God did to build him, to build something inside of him, to prepare him for this moment that he didn't even realize was going to take place. Experiences and challenges in his youth to mold him for the future work of God. I think a lot of us probably, we can look back and we might say the same thing. Things that have happened in your life, maybe when you were younger, or things that happened even when you got older, that God was there preparing you for whatever was coming in your life, to take care of that and give you what you needed for it. So I did want to talk a little bit about his ancestry. And so let's go back a little bit. In the book of Ruth, if you've ever read it, that's David's, it's a little further back here. I just wanted you to understand that Ruth was married to, let's bring that. It was hard for me to get it in my head and reading it. I had to actually get his lineage there. But there was a mother lady. She was in Israel. She was married to this married to Elimelech, the two of them. They went over to Moab, and these were their sons, these two boys here. This Chilion, her husband, Naomi's husband, these boys' father, they died. And it left no inheritance for anyone to take the inheritance or continue the family name, because Naomi didn't have anybody that Ruth could marry. There was nobody left of any other sons. So Ruth ends up marrying Boaz, who was they called it a kinsman redeemer. There's a law about it. And I'm actually going to talk about that later when this is all over in the Bible study, because it's super interesting to me. So she married Boaz, which was related to Elimelech. And by the way the law works, if you take his wife also, take the man that died, Chilion, then you get the inheritance. And by doing that, it made their family continue on. And then Boaz, and they had a son named Obed, and he had a son named Jesse, which is David's father. This is so bizarre, isn't it? And while I was reading it, I just had to keep going back to it and back to it until I finally got it. And when I understood this kinsman redeemer law, then it made sense that he was able to take someone from the family, marry, which is him, and he was able to continue this family on down. What's interesting to me is that she is a Gentile. So there's a big type here going on, but I don't want to go into it because I don't want you to know about it right now. I want to tell you about it later because it's very, very interesting. So you can see where David comes from then through that. And it's interesting to me when I look at the right in Matthew, it goes back that Joseph, which was the son of, and all that you would have a Gentile woman in there. Even the Rahab, the harlot. It tells you that God is merciful and he loves everyone. And he'll use anybody. You need to remember that. Don't sit and think that you're not good enough or whatever. God can use anybody. You see that even in the life of Jesus, where he stretched out the dispensation of grace really wasn't there yet, but he did because of people's faith. Things happened, didn't it? So bear that in mind. Thought it would be interesting for us to understand that family. But anyway, that was all restored. And I also thought that was interesting, too, because Pastor Norm talked about the inheritance Sunday morning. I really enjoyed that. I hope you all enjoyed it, too, because this week, I've been thinking, oh, Lord, I don't want to sell my inheritance for anything. We all have an inheritance, don't we? And we want to keep it, and we don't want to lose it. Okay, let's, in verse 16 and 7. when you see that the Lord spoke to Samuel, we kind of hit on this already, where he said, look not on the countenance or the height of their stature, because I've refused them. For the Lord seeth, like I said, he looks on the inward and not the outward. So I look at that and, you probably have it in your little handout. It says, what does it mean that God looks on our heart? He knows. You can't hide anything from him. That sounds like, a scary thing, but in reality, it's a good thing that God knows. What if he couldn't judge and he didn't really know where you were coming from? And his mercy is new every day, isn't it? New every day. And it isn't always the one that looks the part that is used. We see that all throughout the Bible. It's however their heart is at. We saw where Judah was. I wanted you to see that on the map. I want to make sure I didn't miss some of these things. So there's some interesting things, too, about this. David is very much a type of Christ. And if you look, David was born in Bethlehem, wasn't he? Who else was born in Bethlehem? Jesus was born in Bethlehem. Oh, don't leave me in the dark here like the night of the game that we had. Nobody knew. David was a shepherd, and Jesus said, I am the good shepherd, didn't he? And David was the youngest, and he was overlooked, an overlooked son, but God chose him, didn't he? Jesus came from a humble family, but he was also overlooked too. I even remember the scripture when Philip tells Nathan that Jesus was the Messiah. And what was Nathan's comment? Can anything good come out of Nazareth? See how judgmental we are? I mean, here we're talking about the Messiah, but here he looks at that just because of some things he knows and says something like that. David was anointed with oil in the Spirit. Jesus was anointed with the Holy Ghost and inside in his baptism. And I like the fact that we'll get into another time. Ruth was a Gentile in David's lineage. And Jesus came as a Savior for all nations. The Messiah, the anointed one. And really, the church itself is going to be made up of a lot of Gentiles. So there is a lot of, I think you'll see that as we go out through this next few months here, that there is a lot of things that David and Christ, that David was a type. Like I said, we looked on the outward appearance, and there's ways that we ourselves, we look at people, and we might look at them by the way they're dressed, maybe how clean they are, what material things they possess, what their education is. And based on some of those things, we might put the person a little more up here and then put the other person a little down here. Oh, don't do that. Because you look at a lot of things in the Bible, and God used a lot of, who would have thought the Apostle Paul? He's killing the church, but he ends up being the most important writer and the most important person to the New Testament church. Things can change. People's hearts can change. David, he spent a lot of years as a shepherd before he entered any kind of public, I'll call it ministry. And might not even think he's not able to even stand up in front of people. How could he be a king? He's only been out with sheep. But I think he learned a lot from that. Learned a lot on the way they were. And then there were the times that, which you'll hear here in a little bit too. Remember how he fought a lion and he fought a bear. Well, prepared him for the battle he's going to come up against here in a little bit. And again, Jesse didn't even invite David to the gathering. Boy, that might make you feel a little left out. How would you feel? Your whole family's there, but I'm not invited. Think about that kind of stuff when things are going on in your life. It hurts to be left out, doesn't it? It can really hurt. But it's funny in this case because he's left out only to discover that later God had a completely different entire plan for him in his life, didn't he? He was needed to be there. But the Spirit of the Lord, it departed from Saul, didn't it? And then he had this evil spirit, it says, that was sent from God to trouble him. And I looked at that when I see that, which we'll hear a little more about that too, and I thought of Job. You know, what do you mean in this evil spirit? Well, if God took his spirit from Saul, where's his protection at that point? What is there to help him and guide him? Same thing with Job. God allowed certain things to happen to Job, didn't he? It wasn't that things were out of control. God still had him in control, but he allows it. Sometimes things are allowed for us to help us, teach us things, isn't it? So this could have been the same type of thing. And then I also thought of the part where when his spirit departed from him, which I'm kind of jumping the gun even telling that because that's in the next coming up here. But I thought about Romans, in the beginning of Romans, where it talks about in Romans 1:28, and even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind to do those things which are not convenient. And I thought of Saul on that. He was disobedient. He ended up going to a witch, an evil spirit, to get information of what he should do for the choices that he should be made. So these people in Rome, in the Romans, they made choices too, didn't they? That brought them to this point where God gave them over to whatever it is they wanted, this reprobate mind that they have. And there's a lot of terrible things listed in there. Being filled with all unrighteousness, fornication, wickedness, covetousness, maliciousness, full of envy, murder, debate, deceit. The list just goes on. And it says, who knowing the judgment of God, which I think Saul knew that they which commit such things are worthy of death. Not only do the same, but have pleasure in them that do them. You can get too far gone, and Saul did. And he was not. God let him go. Because he couldn't get him back. He made his choice, and he couldn't do anything more with him. In 1 Samuel 16, 21, 23, it says, David came to Saul and stood before him, and Saul loved him greatly, and he became his armor bearer. And I'm just setting up this story here, how later, at first Saul liked him, but he started degrading more and more. And Saul even sent to David's father Jesse, saying, let David, I pray thee, stand before me, for he hath found favor in my sight. And it came to pass, when the evil spirit from God was upon Saul, that David took an harp and played with his hands. So Saul was refreshed and was well, and the evil spirit would depart from him. I don't know. If you're ever feeling bad, put some music on. Has it ever lifted you up? It can. It can lift you up and get your mind away from certain things. The anxiety or whatever's going on. So remember this part where he was chosen. Saul was rejected. And we have a new king that's coming on, but it's going to be many years before he actually becomes king. So I'm going to move into week 2 here, the giant slayer. And in your little handout, it has a little thing, calls it a hook question. It says, what is the biggest obstacle standing between you and where God is calling you? What is the giant that seems too large, too powerful, too permanent to overcome. But it says today we're going to watch this little teenager boy walk into a valley and change history. Not because he was strong, but because he knew who his God was. We need to be that same way. We can't be feared by it. So here we are in 1020 BC. David's been serving in Saul's court as a musician, as an armor bearer. His 3 brothers are in the army. But now the Philistines have put together their force and advanced into the foothills, and they want to take on and fight Israel. Look at her. She's so good. So here's the Philistines' camp here, and over here's Israel's camp. And they're right between this valley. Now, over here's where the Philistines live. Remember Gath? And this fight with Goliath is going to take place right here. Let's talk about that a little bit. I also want to mention that the Philistines, they had a monopoly on the iron smelting. Another thing Pastor Norm told us about. I thought that word smelting was weird. Sounds weird. And but anyways, sharpening iron, blacksmiths. And Israel didn't really have that inside of their in their nation. And it put a real struggle between the two of them because they had more of an advanced, you might say they had advanced technology there. But let's go on to this story. Both these things I'm telling you tonight, most of you have heard before. But there's this challenge that's going to take place. It's been 40 days, and Goliath has stood in that valley every morning, evening, issuing this challenge, and no Israelite had answered yet. 1 Samuel 17:3 and 4. Each side, is on opposite sides there. The Philistines stood on the mountain on the one side. Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, and there was the valley between them. And there went out, what it says, a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath. And then in 1 Samuel 17:8 through 10, a little bit further down there, this is what he says. He stood and he cried unto the armies of Israel and said unto them, why are you come out to set your battle in array? Am not I a Philistine, and you servants of Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. And if he be able to fight with me and to kill me, then will we be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then shall you be our servants and serve us. And the Philistine says, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. Interesting. There's a lot of interesting things about this that I want to bring up. First of all, let me see if I can do this without bumbling things around. Here's how tall Goliath is. Now, I have to stand off of the platform because this is not quite, this is about 5 inches less. So he's, say, upright to the ceiling there is how tall he would have been to me. I might be scared. I think we all might be scared. But we'll talk about that in a minute too. Then it says in his spear, the length of it is about 10 to 13 feet, so it's almost as tall as him. It's as tall as him or a little bit more. And it weighed 25 to 30 pounds. But the spear tip itself weighed 15 to 17 pounds. That's this. And I'm thinking, okay, for me to heave this at anybody, it ain't going to work at all. So you don't have to come now, but I'm going to leave it up here so you can come and pick it up and think, that's just what the tip of the spear was. But the whole thing weighed twice that almost. And, I mean, he had to be a very big man to pick that up and throw it. The other thing is his armor weighed 125 pounds. I asked Olivia, how much do you weigh? She told me 115. I said, well, come here, let me see if I can pick you up. And I was going to do that here, and I thought, I think that's best we don't, because one of us might get hurt. But what I did want to say to you, how many have a water softener? And you know those big bags of salt you bring in? They're 40 pounds. Think of 3 of those. I'm going to die just going down the steps when I'm carrying 2 of them down. And imagine that your armor weighs that much and it's on you. I mean, he had to be a very big guy and very strong guy. And he had been yelling these things out for 40 days. And all of Israel, including King Saul, was paralyzed in fear over this one man. Now, I find it strange that who said Goliath has the rules of how we're going to fight? He comes out, just this one man, this is what we're going to do. And they are so afraid that they can't even think straight. And nobody wants to move. Nobody can do anything. They're paralyzed in fear for 40 days. Why didn't they just go out there and take them all themselves? Why does it have to be one man? Why do they have to even take on what he's saying? But I thought sometimes people, something happens to you and you can't think straight. You become so scared, paralyzed, flipped out, anxious, anxiety, and you don't logically think what you could do. They could have had a better plan. They could have just said, forget this. And when they could have said, okay, we're all going out, we're going to fight. You 20 take on the big mouth guy. I just thought it was interesting to me that all of a sudden over one man coming out there, why they thought they had to, that was the negotiation that had to be taken. But he obviously, based on what I just showed you, was a scary man. So David, he's not even a soldier. His dad sends him to this fight for some food to give to his brothers. And in 1 Samuel 17:20, it says, David rose up early in the morning, left the sheep with the keeper, and took and went. And really, when you read some of that, David could not hardly stand it. He wanted to go there anyway. He was so wanting to be there. And his brothers, they resented him for it for some reason. Maybe they were bugged still about the whole king thing that had went on. And so his dad tells him to go. And so David comes to the trenches, it says in verse 20. And as the host was going forth to the fight, shouting for the battle, he arrives at the line, and he hears Goliath's challenge. And he's amazed by it. And he responds immediately. In verse 26, he arrives asking, what is happening? And David spake to the men, and they stood by him, saying, what shall be done to the man that killeth the Philistines and taketh away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of God? Well, he's got a whole different thinking going on, doesn't he? He's not paralyzed by this fear, and he certainly hasn't been for the last 40 days dealing with it. They all saw this. They all thought they were beat because the guy was so big. But David, he saw a man who was defying their living God, didn't he? And that was completely unacceptable for him. Really, the key to courage isn't that you just ignore how big the problem is. It's seeing how much bigger God is. Looking at it that way. But for some reason, why they complied and they were in fear, they just were. Maybe it was set up because God had something he wanted them to see and to show them. Well, then David, he volunteers. He'll fight him. It made his brothers bugged. Like he's some little pipsqueak kid saying he'll fight him. And Saul was skeptical about it. David, he responds about his relationship between the past with the things that had happened in his life with the bear. In Samuel 17:34-37, it says, I don't even know. The scriptures have been coming up, I'm assuming. Yes. And David said unto Saul, thy servant kept his father's sheep, and there came a lion and a bear and took a lamb out of the flock, and I went after him. Now think, he was young. At this point right now, and what's happening, he's probably, it says 17 to 19. Some say he might have been a little bit younger. But I went out after him and smote him and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose against me, I caught him by the beard and smote him and slew him. Okay. And the servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing he hath defied the armies of the living God. David said, moreover, the Lord hath delivered me out of the paw of the lion and out of the paw of the bear, and he will deliver me out of the hands of this Philistine. I was surprised when I read this, and Saul said unto David, go, and the Lord be with thee. I mean, he may have had some faith that the Lord was going to do it. But the first thing about that, I'm like, what? Why? It surprises me because they're also afraid, and they've been also afraid for 40 days, but it's okay that we're going to send the little 17-year-old boy out to fight the guy. I didn't understand the logic of that, but, he had a lot of faith. He was probably convincing, and he gave his stories. See how God worked with him in the past for this very moment. Think about that. When things are happening to you, you're going to learn something from that. You're going to take that, and something else is going to come along, and you will have had that experience to help you get through that moment. You're probably thinking, well, I don't really want either of the moments. But that's how it works, isn't it? And he was just, the Lord's going to deliver me because of the things that have happened to me in my life. So then he begins to prepare, and he's going to go out and meet Goliath. And, of course, Saul, he wants him to take his armor and put it on him. This will protect you. You need this. Well, he didn't even want it because he had never done that. He wasn't even a fighter. He wasn't a military man of any kind. It just kind of got in his way, didn't it? And in 1 Samuel 17:40, it says, and he took his staff in his hand, and he chose 5 smooth stones out of the brook, put them in a shepherd's bag, which he had, even in the script. Okay, well, I thought, what is a script? I looked at it. It's really just kind of another name for the shepherd's bag. And his sling was in his hand, and he drew near to the Philistine. Now, he took 5 stones. A lot of people say, well, Goliath had 4 of the brothers. Maybe he thought he was going to have to take them on too. I really don't know. Some people say, well, it's because Jesus has 5 letters in his name. But I look at that and I think, okay, well, what interpretation are you getting? Because not every one of them would have that same thing. So David prepares for all this. And, really faith has careful preparation with it too at times, doesn't it? They kind of go hand in hand. Sometimes you just have to spontaneously believe and do something at the moment. But David prayed a lot, didn't he? And he prepared. He trusted in God well before this moment. So this confrontation is going to start in, and he goes out to see Goliath. And I want to just read here what Goliath says in verse 43. And the Philistine said unto David, am I a dog that thou comest to me with staves? And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, come to me, and I will give thy flesh unto the fowls of the air and to the beasts of the field. And I thought, oh, this is kind of like when David was going to be anointed, or who was going to be the king. They all misjudged David then too, didn't they? And now Goliath is doing the same thing. He's misjudging him because God is seriously on his side, isn't he? So David responds. Then said David to the Philistine, come thou comest to me with a sword and a spear and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee, take thy head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the hosts of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth. And all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. Think about that. We have things that happen in our own lives, don't we? Right here in this church, we pray, God delivers, gives us miracles so that people can know there is a God, isn't there? That there is a God in the midst of Grace Point. And all this assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with the sword and spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. That's a lot of faith. Now, I don't think David was talking trash talk. You know, you see these fighters get on TV and I'm going to take you and do this and that to you. But that's not what was going on here. I think this was a spiritual declaration from David that what his God was going to do, that all the earth would know that there's a God in Israel. He wasn't taking it for any personal glory of any kind, was he? He was fighting for the glory of God. And like you said, the battle, it really is the Lord's. And he believed so much that it says he began to run towards Goliath. 1 Samuel 17, 48, 50. And it came to pass when the Philistine arose and came and drew near to meet David, that David asked and ran towards the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in that bag, and he took out that stone and the sling, and he smote the Philistine in the forehead. That stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth. Who would have thought? So skillful. God made him so skillful, and God took over there, and that thing hit the mark, didn't it? Exactly where it should. And David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone. Think about that. Smote the Philistines, slew them, but there was no sword in the hand of David. Think about that. I think what faith he had, what amazing faith that David had. I know that I would find it hard to look up to that big, huge guy. Because even though he's tall, you know he's a beast. You know he was. And I marvel at the faith of a 17 to 19-year-old that could have such great faith. And with no hesitation, he just did it. He ran right to him. He didn't walk. Didn't say he carefully went up there, a little bit scared. He had such great faith, he just ran straight to him and knew God was going to take care of it just like God had done for him in the past. So the weapon that killed this mighty warrior was a stone, just a little stone from a brook in the hand of a little shepherd boy. God, he likes using small things, doesn't he? To defeat the great. And it's done to show we have a great God, don't we? I'm sure all of you have testimonies and stories that you would love to say. David wrote this psalm, Psalms 144:1. It says, "Blessed be the Lord, my strength, which teacheth my hands to war and my fingers to fight." God is the one. God is the one that's going to take care of it. So I want you to remember these scriptures here. 1 Samuel 17:45 and 46. Then said David to the Philistine, "Thou comest to me with a sword and a spear and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts." When you're being attacked by the devil, you have something going on, you put that out there to him. I'm coming to you in the name of the Lord. And then he said, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. God can deliver. He can take care of your situation. Whatever you're facing right now, whatever you feel like might be your big Goliath in your life, something that's enormous, that's intimidating you, defying God's purpose in your life, right? What does it take for us to approach that challenge like David and declare those things that we come in the name of the Lord? Now, I found this, I thought it was interesting, that expert slingers could launch stones at 60 to 100 miles per hour with a lethal accuracy. The Benjamin tribe, slingers, they could hit targets within a hair's breadth. Am I saying it? Yes. That's pretty accurate, pretty good. And it says that right in Judges 20:16. Among all this people, there were 700 chosen men left-handed. Everyone could sling stones at a hair's breadth and not miss. So that's already a scripture somewhere about it. But I think it takes God, especially a boy that young, never been in any kind of battle or anything. And I also think it's interesting where they didn't have any real iron workers. But the Philistines did. It was like they had a technology that Israel didn't have. And we can look at that today. It doesn't matter what technology we might have, somebody else might have. God is the one. The battle is God's. He will take care of it. And it doesn't matter how big that person is. Now, Goliath, he stood as champion of the enemy of God, holding Israel in fear and bondage, didn't he? Just like people today. They live in sin. They live in fear. They're in bondage. But we have a David, don't we, today? And his name is Jesus. And David entered that valley alone as a champion of God's people, and he defeated the enemy with one little decisive blow, didn't he? This is a picture to me of the cross. It's a picture of Jesus. He entered the valley of death, didn't he, alone? Bearing the full force of sin, Satan, but he defeated it all at Calvary, didn't he? David's victory freed all of Israel from the Philistines, but Christ's victory freed believers from the bondage of sin and death. Hebrews 2:14 and 15 says, for as much then as the children are partakers of flesh and blood, he also himself likewise took part of the same, that through death he might destroy him that had the power of death, and that is the devil, and deliver them who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage. It looks the same to me, doesn't it to you? They were in fear. They were in bondage. Boy, but Jesus came along, didn't he? And he took that place, and he was the one that could take care of it all. Colossians 2:13 and 15 says, and you, being dead in your sins and uncircumcision of your flesh, hath he quickened together with him, having forgiven you all trespasses, blotting out the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, which was contrary to us, and took it out of the way, nailing it to the cross, and having spoiled principalities and powers, he made a show of them openly, triumphing over them in it. David, a type of Christ, that he took it on, and Jesus fought that battle for us, didn't he? Took care of all of it. David used Goliath's own sword, and Jesus used the instrument of death that he was going to conquer to destroy the power of death. Thought that was interesting. I just want to hit on a couple more things, and then we'll dismiss. But David's courage came from his testimony, where he said that the Lord delivered him from the lion and the bear. We all have personal testimonies, don't we? That we can lean on and rely on what God has done for us and how God was faithful. And it gives us courage for the current challenge that we have that's taken place. And the whole army who saw Goliath and thought, he is too big to fight, David looked at it and thought, he is too big to miss. You know? David said the battle is the Lord's. He ran towards Goliath. How do we balance trusting God completely and taking hold of these things that happen in our life and take action? We can learn from this, can't we? God chose a little shepherd boy to sling that stone and defeat that giant. It doesn't take a lot with God. You don't have to have a lot. And I thought about Pastor Jeremy, who just told us about the last Wednesday, I think it was, the 5,000 that were fed. It was a little boy. And he just had 2 fish and some loaves of bread. And God delivered him and took care of him, didn't he? God takes the small things and he can use that and make it great to show he is a great God. And he's greatly to be praised. So I'm going to leave you with this. What giant are you being called to run towards in the name of the Lord and hosts? Think about that in your life. Because that battle is the Lord's. It's not yours. Look into your life and proclaim the name of Jesus, that he can take care of it and he can handle it. Okay. Lord bless you. So we started out with David be a young boy as a shepherd. He was anointed as king. That's really not